Marley Cold Brewer, what's up, buddy? He said, I agree 1,000%. They knew Miles and Jordan weren't 100% healthy, so Sirianni went to the pass first. All right, guys. The title of today's video, I wanted to come in here and I wanted to talk about the running game. And this is a hypothesis, okay? This does not mean any of this is true, okay? I'm just hypothesizing what may have happened. I was a little shocked at, the ratio of run to pass in the first half of that Washington game. And it's not as, as crazy as like we saw in Dallas where we only had like 3 runs and it was like, what are we doing here? But the rate of run was different from what I would have expected. And the way it kind of worked itself out was, if I'm correct on the numbers here, I think we had 18 passes in the first half, 10 rushes in the first half, which isn't like, it's not a crazy distorted number. But for the Eagles, it feels like a crazy distorted number given the recipe of success we've had over the past like 7 weeks or so. It just seemed like such a deviation from what was working. And I was wondering, because, there's a lot of variables to this. That's the problem, is like we're trying to narrow down the variables. And I don't know how easy it is to narrow down the variables here. Because on one hand, we have the shortened week. So you have a war of attrition on the players, even though we're coming off of a bye week. They pushed the game to Tuesday, which caused a 5-day rotation between these 2 games. We know that one of our running backs was already dealing with some ankle and a quad injury, and Miles Sanders ends up breaking his hand, unfortunately. So we know we had a kind of already our feature back, if you want to call him that, was already beat up a little bit. In the game, Jordan Howard was coming back from an injury himself. But in the game, he suffered a stinger, and we kind of got depleted. But that really didn't knock us off of running the ball in the second half. So it's kind of like what when I titled the video, when I was talking about in the video, which is, did Nick Sirianni kind of go away from the run because of a concern with injuries in this shortened week? I'm wondering if there was some kind of a weird approach here where they said, okay, look, we're going to go to the shorter passing game to kind of supplement the run, just because we don't want to encourage more injuries along the offensive line. We don't want to encourage more injuries along our running game. We know we have this 2-game stretch to make the playoffs following this game. We feel like we can still beat this team. I'm wondering how much of that stuff kind of played into the decision, guys. And like I said, I don't have the answer for it. I'm not even going to pretend to have the answer for that. I'm just saying it's something that clearly crossed my mind when I was looking at Nick Sirianni and like what happened out there on the field, because I greatly questioned the play calls. You guys know that, I thought that something was going on here with the play calls. I was not a huge fan of the way Nick called that game. And I'm wondering if the reason Nick called the game the way he did had to do with the fact that there were some challenges with the coaching staff, himself being placed in the protocol and having to be isolated in a hotel room, not there to really, do things. And on the same time, like, you have an offensive line that is getting a little nicked up, right? He's getting beat up. Even Nate Herbig's suffering some knee stuff right now. So you do have some little issues with your offensive line. Landon Dickerson was just returning from, I'm not going to say that word, but we know exactly what he was returning from, everybody. So I'm wondering what kind of role this is playing and why we may have come out with this type of game plan, because it just seemed like such a deviation from what we've had success with. And now I'm wondering, and here's the funny thing about this season, I'm going to stop predicting anyone's winning anything. I think we should stop with the mindset that we're automatically going to take that 7th seed. We have a great opportunity to take the 7th seed. I don't think it's a guarantee, because I don't even know who's going to be on the field the next 2 weeks. None of us do. I'll put it to you this way. Let's shape the conversation like this. I would say Green Bay is probably the best team in the NFC right now. I know it's all argumentative, but I'm just going to say, for sake of argument, I'm going to say Green Bay is the best team in the NFC, right? Say the Eagles win as a 7th seed against that 2 seed, right? And then you go in and you're in that, the division round. And we draw Green Bay because Green Bay is the highest seed, we're the lowest seed. The money line would probably tell you, if Aaron Rodgers is in that game, this is not much of a game. They're going to put us away. I'm not saying that's the reality, guys. I'm saying the money line. But here's the point, to illustrate my point. What happens if Aaron Rodgers is a no-go because of this? What happens if Aaron Rodgers gets put on this list? Is Green Bay still a favorite on the money line? I highly doubt it, because I think the roles get reversed and you're looking at the Eagles absolutely pounding the Packers if that were to happen. That's a bad way of stating that. Pause. You get what I mean, though? That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't want to predict anything, because I don't know how this stuff, like, it's been kind of crazy the last couple of weeks. I don't know how to predict this stuff going forward because all it takes is for the right weird swing of things to happen, put you on these lists and keep you out of the game. And you can completely change the shape of the playoffs. You can completely change the shape of, how the season kind of plays itself out. I don't think anything's a guarantee. I'm definitely skeptical because of all this. It makes me a little weary to come out on record and say anything, to feel confidence about anything about the NFL because I don't know. I mean, Washington had a rough loss to Dallas coming into our game, but I thought that game would be more competitive than when it was. I didn't anticipate them losing as many players as they lost, and now they're in a complete tailspin. I mean, they're fighting each other on the sidelines. I mean, this is a crazy season. I'm not going to pretend to have any kind of insight that anyone else doesn't have about how it's going to shape out because of the unpredictability, just the nature of how unpredictable this NFL season might be. This could be a season to really remember. All the fears we had about the 20 season in terms of the NFL and like trying to contain, this thing and keep it to where it doesn't completely shut down the season. Somehow we made it through 2020 without really much incident like this. But 2021's kind of reared its ugly head here late in the season with this stuff. And we'll see how it shapes out. Like I said, I'm not pretending to have any kind of knowledge that none of you guys have. And like, I'm not an epidemiologist, so I can't predict these things, guys. I have no clue where to go with that. But it definitely struck me as like maybe we should caution ourselves and let's just go by where the games end up in terms of who's available and what we might be able to do. That's how I look at it. We have a golden opportunity, absolutely. I'm hoping we capitalize upon the golden opportunity. But in the same breath, I know that we should probably take a cautionary standpoint about who may or may not be available for us. Old Burr, what's up, buddy? He said, I agree 1,000%. They knew Miles and Jordan weren't 100% healthy. So Sirianni went to the pass first. That's what my hunch is, Marley. I mean, like I said, I don't have any inside information, but that's what it just felt like from like the deviation we took. It felt like they must have known that the running game was going to be mixed up and they were just trying to get to the longer week to get themselves back centered and thought like, there's no way we're dropping this game to the Giants, especially with who they got at quarterback. What's up, Show Enough? How you doing, buddy? Steichen is to blame. Maybe. I don't know, man. I don't know what happened. It's hard to predict because of the nature of everything that was going on with the shortened week, or a head coach being isolated into a hotel room. Like, I have no clue how much any of that stuff, played a role, but you know how it goes, man. I think Boston Scott and Gainwell can step up with their powerful O-line smashing. I hope. I mean, Boston Scott has the ability to be a little bit of a contact balance back. He could definitely run between the tackles, and he's definitely fast and explosive. I mean, he's got a little wiggle to him. He's quick. That's why you have these guys, right? That's why you're 4 deep at running back. It's for moments like this. My hope is that Jordan Howard will be good to go, and that Stinger's nothing really serious, and he's good to go after having a regular week of time off. But I don't pretend to know the severity of that injury. You know what I mean? Like the last time Jordan Howard had a stinger, it was not very good. What do we do at running back? I think you need to dress 3. I don't know. I don't know if they still have Adrian Killins maybe on the practice squad. Let me take a look at the practice squad. We can see. I mean, short answer probably be you elevate somebody from your practice squad up. I don't really know who's on our practice squad currently, so I have to take a look and see in terms of running backs. So Jason Huntley is on the practice squad. So, yeah, you probably would elevate Huntley. So, yeah, AK's not even on the practice squad anymore. He's on another team probably. So you'd have to probably elevate Jason Huntley, I would imagine. Jason Huntley's former 5th-round pick. The Eagles had a ton of interest in him in 2020's draft. So, I mean, you kept the guy around. You know what I mean? You could dress him as a 3rd. If you're going to use Kenneth Gainwell a lot, he can take Gainwell's role as a kick returner. I'm pretty sure he can field punts too. I think early on in 2020 when we were kind of fielding all those dudes, I think he was one of those guys that was even taking punts. I don't think we ever used him in a game per se, but he certainly was back there fielding punts. So you could definitely elevate a Huntley if you have to. Have him do kick returns and maybe punt returns if you're really worried about making sure your key guys can be out there on offense. And Huntley gives you a receiving option too. Huntley's a pretty good receiving back. He's not he's not the biggest guy in the world, but I mean he's explosive too. He's a guy to get him to the edge. He could be a problem, but we didn't have great success doing that last season. We tried a couple times with Doug to get him to the edges, and it didn't really work. So we'll have to see how he's progressed kind of with a full year and some change now in the league. I mean, as that vision, that patience, has that maturity, kind of grown in him. Philly, the podcast. What's good, man? How you doing, Joe? Said call Huntley up. Probably gonna have to, man. Probably gonna have to. So here goes Drew Johnson, seconding your motion, Joe. He said, agreed. Castro, Philly, the podcast. Hey, bro, you got a second on it. Chaos the Filthy said, I think we're good at running back with the three we have in Howard, Scott, and Gainwell. If Howard's a good go, though, Chaos. You remember, Howard had to leave the game because he had a stinger, and the last time Howard had a stinger, he never returned. So you always have to be a little concerned with that nerve damage to the shoulder. And I don't know the severity of it, Chaos. I don't want to play a doctor. You know what I mean? Like, it's not my forte. But I'm, obviously I would love to have, Jordan Howard available with Boston Scott. Then you can have Gainwell play he can play the 2-minute role. He can play the special teams role. He can be a receiving option. He can do those things for you. But we'll see how it works out. I don't know. I don't want to profess anything here. You got Drew said Gainwell is not a power back, but he doesn't shy away from contact and gives a little pop too. Yeah, he's more of a one-cut runner than you would have thought, right? I mean, he gives you more of a one-cut running aspect than is probably would have been the general consensus coming into this. I thought of him more as kind of an elusive type guy. So I mean, he's proven to be quite effective on the goal line, actually running. Drew Johnson said, even if Howard dresses, I agree to bring up Huntley. Depends on how you're viewing it from, like I said, like a special teams role, things like that. I guess one way you can look at it too is that two guys I kind of glossed over, and I don't mean to diminish their importance to the team because I do think special teams is very important, the third phase of the game. But Sean Bradley and Andre Chachere being on this list doesn't help things because those are two of our better special teams players. So, looking at Huntley and saying that guy can give you some special teams, utilization as well, I could certainly understand that perspective. Show enough said Huntley can ball. No, he never returned Chaos, but I don't know his status. You know what I mean? I don't want to say like, oh man, he's out. I don't know his status. The only one I know is definitely out. Sanders has definitely been ruled out, but hard to say. You know what I'm saying? It's really hard to say like what's going to happen here. Some numbers I want to talk about in the running game. I want to talk about Miles Sanders a little bit. All right, while we kind of have a chance to talk here, guys. So Miles Sanders is a funny person to break down because I do think there's real talent with Miles Sanders. I think Miles Sanders sometimes can get a bad rap just because of the nature of his injuries, right? He always gets a little nicked up, which is always a little frustrating, right? It's never anything major, but it's always these like lingering little nagging injuries with him. But the crazy thing is when I looked over his production, I was quite surprised with what I found. So to begin with, on the season, only 137 attempts, probably a bad omen because I'm not too sure he's going to get back before the end of the regular season. And that's, I think even last year he was around 160 attempts, so he's down, which is good for Miles Sanders in the long term because you're keeping mileage off of him. But he's never really going to get to that 1,000-yard mark if you can't get him over probably 175 handoffs on a consistent basis. I mean, it's really difficult to break 1,000, yards rushing when you're under 175 attempts on the season. That's almost you got to have like a special type season, guys. So 137 attempts, 754 yards. He's over 750 yards, which is really good numbers. Yards per average is 5.5, which ranks second. He's tied for second with guys like Jonathan Taylor and a few other guys. So very productive. His efficiency. Let me explain what efficiency means, guys. Efficiency is how they rate like one-cut runners, who's north and south versus the more east and west, right? Some of this is you can't say that a guy doesn't dance just because he has a really good efficiency ranking. It just means the system they're in, right? So the lower your number is, means the more north and south you are. The higher your number is means the more east and west you are. So you got to take things into context, right? So if you're looking at San Francisco and you have like Elijah, Mitchell, of course, they run more outside zone. So of course his efficiency rating is going to be higher than like Miles Sanders. But Miles Sanders' efficiency rating is 3.35, which ranks 5th in the league. He's the 5th highest graded north to south one-cut runner in the National Football League. I will say that doesn't excuse the fact that sometimes Miles Sanders misses the read on the hole. He goes to the wrong hole sometimes. I think that's his biggest problem. But he's definitely developed, it really began underneath Deuce Staley. Deuce probably really deserves the credit. But he's developed as a one-cut runner. Now, here's the complex part about Miles Sanders. When we look at 8+ boxes, how often defenses bring in those extra defenders, 8+ defenders in the box to shut you down? It's only 10.22%. 10%, guys. That's the third lowest ranking among all active running backs to be measured. He doesn't face a lot of 8-man boxes. Some of that has to do with, the scheme. Nick likes to do some things where he'll run bunch formations and he'll try to get defenses to spread out. Then he'll try to hit that inside zone because he's taking guys out of the box to do that. So things like that definitely impact why he doesn't get a lot of 8-man boxes. But it also does make you worry that it's crazy because on one hand, teams should respect us more. They should respect the fact that we can run on them. But they're also not respecting us enough to counter what we're doing to them and just bring more into the box. And I think that that's part of the reason why our passing game hasn't opened up the way we partially expected it to by design, is because teams are still not giving up the middle of the field. What I'm saying is, guys, if you bring down that safety, if you walk the safety down and just let your 3 players on the outside play, you're going to have more opportunities in the passing game to win matchups, and you're not going to have anyone on the middle of the field. Teams are kind of refusing to do that to us, judging by the 8+ box number, because I know what Nick likes to do. Nick likes to run spread to spread you out and run inside zone on you. And it is kind of what it is. You know what I mean? Time behind the line of scrimmage. So total time spent behind the line of scrimmage. This has a lot to do with the system you run. It also has a lot to do with the depth that your system puts you in. So if you're a constant 5-yard, deep runner and your quarterback's under center, of course your total, time behind the line of scrimmage is going to be higher. Your average time behind line of scrimmage is going to be higher than other players, right? So other thing to consider here is we run a lot of RPO, so you're holding to read. That's going to put you behind the line of scrimmage longer than other teams might be. So all those things kind of have to be factored in here. So time behind the line of scrimmage on average, 2.76, which is about, I'd call that middle of the pack, guys. He ranks 26th out of the players that are graded, which is kind of right in the middle area. Keep in mind, you always have to analyze these things in the context of the system and the scheme. Just for some clarity's sake, 2.76 ties with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is 2.76. Dalvin Cook is 2.76. But it's longer than guys like Antonio Gibson, who's 2.71. Josh Jacobs is 2.66. Fournette is 2.65. But it's drastically shorter than guys like Tony Pollard at 2.93. Nick Chubb at 3.15. Elijah Mitchell in San Francisco, that outside zone, 2.91. And it's kind of right on par with what you see on Indianapolis, right? I mean, you take a look at Jonathan Taylor, it's 2.77. Miles Sanders, average time behind the line of scrimmage is 2.76. Looking at greater production numbers. 10+ yards, so runs over 10 yards. Although he's only had 137 attempts on the season. And everybody that's ahead of him that I'm about to tell you has had far more running attempts than him. He ranks 10th with 20. Miles Sanders has got that shake, man. He can be explosive. When we look at breakaway plays, from the running back position, they consider anything over 15 yards to be a breakaway. Once again, 137 attempts. Everybody that's going to be in front of him has far more attempts to get those numbers. He ranked 6th. He's just outside the top 5 with 11 breakaway plays of 15+. Now, I do want to bring this in the context that Jordan Howard has 75 rushing attempts on the season, and a lot of this has to do with our offensive line as well. The player deserves credit, no doubt, but the offensive line probably deserves the greater extent of the credit, because even Jordan Howard with 75 attempts, he ranks 43rd in terms of 10+ yard runs with 9, and he ranks 30th in 15+ breakaway plays. So rushes over 15 yards, he's got 5 on the season, which ranks 30th. We got 2 top 45 backs on this football team because of our offensive line. One guy's only registered 75 attempts. The other guy's only registered 137 attempts. And you got a mix of guys between Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott who've also taken rushing attempts, but would also kind of, that's going to bring your numbers in tighter because we're a little bit more of a spread it around kind of running, game. It's weird because we normally think of that through the passing game, but we're very much that in the running game. So I think all those things have to be taken into context, but this offensive line in Miles Sanders' resume is quite good. That's just the type of season we had, and it's disappointing that because of this broken hand, I think he had a real shot at eclipsing 1,000 yards. It was still a stretch. You still had 2 games, and you had to get almost 150 yards. I'm sorry, you almost had to get 250 yards. My bad, guys. In 2 games, which is a bit of a stretch. It would have been hard to do, but I think he would have definitely been around the 900-yard mark, which would have been big for Miles Sanders. If you add in another, 30 attempts, get him up over 160 attempts on the season. He'd have probably had over 900 yards. He'd have been over that 5-yard mark more than likely. This would have been a really great resume builder for him. It's unfortunate that the hand might potentially stop his regular season. They have not put him on injured reserve. And because the reason they're not going to do it is I believe they've already IR'd him once. They put him on the injured reserve. He's shut down for the 2021 season. So I think there's some hope that they could get him back in the playoffs. And they might possibly try to get him back, next week. I don't know. I don't know the severity of the broken hand and what you can do. I don't even know what hand it's on. So it's hard to say. I don't know if it's on his dominant hand or if it's on, his left hand. So we'd have to see with that one. I'm not 100% certain, guys. But nonetheless, frustrating, right? It's frustrating because you got a guy that's next year will be his contract year. He's playing on the last year of his contract, and it's probably not going to float his way, given the way that things have kind of shaped. Dante Hall said, what about Rager? Let's see what he can do. Catching balls out of the backfield and handoffs may help him with kick returns. Yeah, I agree. You could definitely use Rager in a little bit more of a versatile role, like a Deebo Samuel and some other guys. You could definitely go that route. That might be something that they do. But, Rager's got to be better with the vision because Rager has all the athletic gifts to do it, but sometimes his vision's off and he just does boneheaded things.